Hello and welcome everybody to the latest installment in our UXDX online series. I hope you're as excited as I am for the amazing talks that we have in our lineup for tonight. But before we jump into those talks, I want to give a very quick introduction to UXDX and why we host these sessions. So at UXDX, our mission is to help companies shift from building software using waterfall or more commonly water scrumfall and shifting to truly empowered autonomous product teams. Now, why that's our mission is because in a high change environment, we believe it's a more effective, a more efficient, and a more sustainable way of working. And the reason why I said high change was in the old days when you had maybe one project, you disband a team, move them elsewhere, it made sense to use projects. But now in a lot of the companies I work with, there's literally hundreds of projects going on at any given time. And it doesn't make sense to kind of keep disbanding and losing all that knowledge and moving people elsewhere. So if you can have a team that really understand the customer, really understand the business needs for their section of the product and can iterate to improve it, that's how you end up being more effective, efficient, and sustainable. Now that's really easy to say, not so easy to put into practice. And that's where these talks come in. So no one talk is going to cover the entire product development process, but we ask people to come and share how they're improving their ways of working in one section, their section of the product development process. And those ideas, what they come up with, hopefully that will give you some idea of what you can do in your context. And that's actually where the questions come in. So all of these speakers are expecting questions, so please do feel free to ask them, whether it's in the chat box on uxdx.com or on whichever social platform that you're watching this on. And we'll be monitoring those and we'll put those questions to the speakers at the end of their talks. Now, sometimes we can't get through all the questions. And in those cases, we have the UXDX community Slack group, and we'll post any questions we don't have time to get through today in the Ask the Speakers channel, and we'll invite the speakers to come and answer them there for you. But anyway, that's enough about me. You're not here to listen to me talk. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker for this evening. And Catt Small is the staff product designer at Dropbox, and she'll be talking about moving from execution to strategy as a designer. So I'd like to welcome Catt to the stage.
Hi there. Hi. Glad to be here. Thank you for having me. So as was said, I am going to be chatting about moving from execution to strategy as a designer. And thank you for the great introduction. As was said, I am a staff product designer at Dropbox. I am also a game developer, so I've made a variety of games over the past 10 years. Happy to nerd out about that later. And I also co-organize the Game Devs of Color Expo, which is an annual conference that'll be in its 8th year this September. And we're looking for sponsors, so check out GDOC Expo for more information if you're curious. Awesome. So today we are going to talk about strategic design, why it matters, how designers get sidelined and pressured to execute, which is something I have definitely experienced in my career, and tips and tactics for increasing design's contributions to product strategy. So let's dig into one of my favorite subjects. Let's start with the value proposition, just throwing out one of many buzzwords you'll hear. Just kidding. But why should we actually care? Why does strategic design matter? And why does it matter to have a design-led strategy? Firstly, we want to make sure that we are working on the right projects. So direction. Having direction is really crucial, and designers are really good at illustrating, for example, North Stars, visions of the future, helping us to confirm that we are moving toward the right thing, especially in this growth-driven and experimentation-driven world. Secondly, innovation. Designers are amazing at looking outside of the box, thinking of inspiring solutions, looking at something that you wouldn't quite expect and drawing something from that and finding something amazing from it. And designers are also great at determining when it is better to stick to predictable solutions. So thinking about accessibility and things like recall versus finding totally new solutions out there. Sometimes it is actually good to have a predictable solution, and designers can really help to navigate that innovation and predictability kind of paradigm. Next, confidence. Designers are also very good at helping people to validate that their solutions are going to have an impact. So we have been trained to gather insights from everywhere, whether it be talking to individuals, figuring out competitive analyses, for example. Designers can really make sure that the work that we are putting into the world is actually going to reach the right people, send the right message. And that's really important for actually launching a product and then also finding product market fit, for example. But this drawing may look familiar to you. Designers often aren't involved in product decisions. So I've had this happen to me before, especially in this remote world, which I do love. But it is very easy for conversations to be siloed, especially when people don't understand what value a designer can bring to the conversation. So let's talk about that. Why is it that even though we bring all this amazing value to the table, we still get sidelined quite often? This has been said well by many people, so I'll just highlight one person who said it very well. A lot of companies wait until they think that they know the solution to a problem, and then they actually engage designers. And it's like they think that the job of design is making the solution look pretty instead of actually engaging with the problem itself and understanding how design thinking, systems design, all of these concepts can actually benefit validating the problem. A lot of people don't, as I alluded to, understand the value of design beyond aesthetics. So some of these phrases might be familiar to you, whether it's, oh, can you just, kind of add a little bit spice to this? Can you mock this up for me? I need this idea to pop a little bit more, make it prettier. These are definitely things that I have heard in my experience as a designer. And I have done as much as I can to show people that there is more to being a designer than these. So, as I mentioned, designers often get pulled in after a solution or a direction has been determined. And then the designer often gets put in a very uncomfortable situation where you have to say, hey, actually, are we solving the right thing? I actually have talked to some customers and I don't know if this will resonate with them, things like that, which mean then that you have to be the gatekeeper. You have to be the person who's pushing back on solutions. And that, of course, puts you at odds and increases that feeling of us versus them, which is really frustrating. It results in a focus on production. It generates worse outcomes for customers. And of course, when it comes to teams, it makes people not want to work together. So it will just intensify the challenges that you have with getting things done in the future. I have experienced these kinds of things personally. So, for example, with my experience on the SoundCloud Go launch in 2016, I absolutely love SoundCloud. And I was very excited to get to work on helping them figure out how to monetize their product experience. They already had a product that existed for creators. So, people who would upload sounds to the platform were actually paying for storage, but they also needed to figure out a way to pay the music industry and the music labels for the tracks that people were listening to, especially when those were copyrighted content. And so they wanted to release a subscription service, but the subscription service that they had put together had mostly been done without user research or talking to designers. And so when they actually had figured out the package, they then pulled in designers to actually figure out how to sell it to customers. And from research and from doing lots of design work, we recognized that a subscription service of the kind that they had put together was not going to be compelling. So then we had to figure out how to say, no, wait. But it was too late to do that. And so subscription numbers were super low. And SoundCloud is still one of my favorite platforms, but it's definitely been in recovery mode since then. And for me, this really underscored the importance of designers being involved earlier. So let's talk about how we can do that. How the heck do you do that? I'm going to share several different tactics for increasing design-led strategy. And I'm going to be talking to people who are ICs, as well as people who are in management roles. So whether you are somebody who is on the ground, who is often being asked to ship design, or you are a leader in the management sense who is hearing constantly, like I need to be involved sooner in the process, or like these PMs never involve me, those kinds of things. I'm going to share some opportunities for both groups. So tactic number one is to focus on goals. So again, a lot of people have said this very well, and I think that it's very important to share your goals with your team and to get them involved and to learn what matters to the business. So here's an example of what happens when you don't do this. So a lot of newer designers will forget that design occurs within the context of an organization. They've gone to design school, and a lot of times, as a person I went to graphic design school, so I definitely was guilty of this. I thought about design in terms of the creative artistic sense and not really about how it connects to the broader strategy and the potential that it has in terms of helping businesses connect with their customers and finding products that really match both what the business needs and the customer needs. That was a thing that I learned over time. And so I learned through a process of just making mistakes and also through taking some courses that design in real life is much more messy. It's complicated. Everybody is contributing to the experience that's actually going to get released. We don't have a lot of control. And so the more that we can learn to speak the language of other people and to understand how we fit into a business, we can actually operate in a way that is more likely to create better experiences. So what I would start with is to actually go speak to people. I talk to my PMs and the people that I work with quite often, and I work to learn what their goals are. Everybody has goals around you, and you just have to ask them what those are. A lot of people are very, very open to chatting with you for 30 minutes, for example, and just answering questions. People absolutely love to talk about themselves. And more specifically, if you are working with a product manager and a data analyst, engineering leads, people like that, definitely reach out to those folks and start to ask them, how did you get into this? What really excites you about product management or engineering or whatever their role is? What are the things that you're focused on for the next 1 to 3 months? Those kinds of questions will really help you understand how you might be able to pitch them on something or to collaborate with them better. And when you focus on this, again, you're going to start to unlock a shared language. So that's really important because you want to make sure that you are framing your conversations from their lens. So one thing I used to do as a designer is I would say, oh, here's this design problem that is really hurting design or our customer experience. But when you actually start to speak the language of other people, you might say, hey, we are actually affecting user churn, or we are creating an experience that leads to this amount of revenue loss because of the way that this experience is not functioning properly. And when you do that, it's actually more likely that people will listen to you. And that kind of is frustrating, but it is real. Something else that you can do is you can take a class to build more of a vocabulary. So I took a class with the Designer Fund. There are a lot of courses out there, especially right now. We're having a huge boom of people talking about things of this nature. So you can definitely look into different classes. I'm sure UXDX will have more things as well, talking about topics of this nature. But it's really important to dig into the language of business and understand things like what business model your company that you're working for has, or maybe you're working as a freelancer. What is the business model of the client that you have? How do they make decisions around what projects or initiatives to support, fund, defund, things like that? Super important for actually figuring out how to move forward and to get people to actually stand behind your ideas. Next, it's important to show up, to be present. And what I mean by this is that you need to show people the value of design, not just say it. So people often at the beginning, they think of design as an output, right? But something that you can do is you can help everybody, yourself included, achieve their goals through design. So you can insert yourself into conversations where design can help in the least creepy way as possible. And you can do things like what my coach calls starting a campaign. So figuring out what your thesis is, what your goal is, and then thinking about the methods through which you will actually nudge people and influence toward your goal. So something that you can do that's really tangible, for example, is say that you have learned something about the total addressable market, or TAM. You can then start to ask questions about that, or say that you have learned about targeting in terms of an audience. or how a persona actually might benefit the work that's being done on market research, for example. Those are things that you can start to ask people about. Hey, when are we planning to launch this experience? Why do we believe this change needs to be made now? Where else in the product might this experience provide value? What are open questions that research could help us answer? Is there anything that we are feeling less confident in that might be helpful to actually visualize? What about maybe doing an end-to-end analysis of or an audit or something like that? There are great ways to help people to just think a little bit more deeply, and design is really great at that. And something I just want to note is that tone is incredibly important here. So the goal is not to be indignant, which I am guilty of. So I definitely used to say, "Ugh, we didn't even do X. We're not doing the process right," things of that nature. People are going to feel attacked and defensive. And if you put people on the defensive, they are not going to be incentivized to include you. So I don't like being that person to say that tone matters. But in this case, it is quite important if you want to maintain these relationships, which I think you do because we're trying to eat, we're trying to pay rent, we're trying to make cool work and release things that we're proud of. So it is really important to think about the way that people are perceiving your message. You can facilitate quick alignment with design. So something that I have done is actually volunteer to illustrate concepts that people are debating. And you can see an example of this here. There was a conversation at Asana where it was all about like, how we're going to build out this data model. And one of the things that I did to help move people forward with this conversation was actually sketch out all the different options that were being discussed in like Dropbox paper or something like that. Like they just had like a huge doc where they were talking about this. And I was like, no, no, no. This is what design is for. So we can actually show how decisions that you make on the back end are going to affect the experience on the front end. And I think from that, people really started to understand, oh my gosh, design actually has something to say. It's really useful. And it's not just about, things that are ready to launch or like execution. It's actually more conceptual than that. So I'm really proud of that. I've also run workshops to encourage discussions and generate ideas. So you can see some examples that come from both Etsy and Asana here. These kinds of conversations can be great for involving lots of people and showing that design can actually also be a facilitator of conversations that can move decisions forward. So I think without doing these kinds of workshops, I think it would have taken a lot longer to make these decisions because I would have had to, I don't even know if I would have been involved, but my PM might have had to go around to a lot of these groups of people that we were talking to individually and actually try to influence them in more silos. And by doing this in a workshop format or in a communal format, you can actually have those conversations out in the open, get through all the conflict as quickly as possible, and move on to the point, which is, again, making good customer experiences. I actually know a friend of mine, Erin Nolan, is running a workshop about facilitating good workshops if you're curious. So I can definitely share a link to that later. Design can also help people make decisions through illustrating the future. So I kind of showed a little bit of an example of that in sketch format, but you can also actually visualize other things like plans. You can visualize roadmaps. You can visualize the prioritization of different features, monetization, for example. So these are different diagrams that I've created at different points in time that helped to actually move conversation forward. So what I would do is I would actually create these diagrams and then I would walk to the different people, or in the digital world, I would send these folks these different artifacts and then ask them questions like, does this look right? Is this what would happen for this particular user group? Is there anything that we need to change? Are there any red flags based on what I've outlined here? Those are conversations and questions that move things forward again. So this is something that I think some designers might scoff at in terms of like, oh, like I'm being asked to illustrate things, but these are actually really crucial parts of the conversation. And I believe that the more that we can be involved in the decision-making process, the more that people are going to look at design as a value add. And then, of course, product visions. Love product visions. Making sure that they're done at the right time and that they're actually referenced is something that's really important here. So a trap that designers often get themselves into is that they create a vision for the sake of making a vision. But I think that it's really important to actually confirm that if you're going to create a vision that is looking 1 to 2 years in the future, for example, that it's something that your team is actually going to reference on a regular basis. And all of this is going to help, again, to show the value of design. It's going to speed up the process. It's going to create clarity. And as a note, if there's a chance to include design in something that you missed, so say that you weren't included in a conversation that has already happened, you can always reach out to those folks and suggest ways that design can contribute in the future. Finally, tactic number 3 is to incentivize. So this one is more centered around leaders. So the previous one, for example, was much more of an IC focus, or, like the first one, especially if you don't know the language, then that's probably more of an IC. The middle one, the second one was more, it could be ICs and managers, but this is definitely focused on managers. So leadership needs to change the incentive structure to reward strategic design. Because if there are not incentives to improve, nothing is actually going to get better. So what I mean by this is, say that your priorities at the company in terms of user experience are mostly visual design focused and not really rewarding people who are more strategic, people who are facilitating conversations, things of that nature. Those people are going to either stop doing that work or they are going to leave. And it is really important that you reward those folks if you want to see better products. So just underscoring this here, it's important that this is not just a bottoms-up effort. If there are not leaders in design, managers, directors, VPs, whomever you have who's in a leadership position, if those people are not pushing priorities, then your efforts are going to be ignored. And that can be really frustrating, but it is the unfortunate truth. If you are doing things that people do not value, you will not be rewarded for it, as hard as that is to say. And as a leader, what I would suggest, if you manage people, for example, I would ask you, how can we reflect the need for strategic design thinking in our org systems? If you're an IC, you can ask your manager that question. Just to kind of underscore with an example, one time when I was a manager, I asked a report if they wanted to try mentoring a more junior designer, because people learn by hearing from other people. Mentorship is super valuable. And it was something that I really wanted people to think about doing. This person asked if the company actually valued mentorship. And so I went and looked in the career ladder and it was not there. So the answer was no. And that's just one example. This happens for all kinds of situations. And that includes the incentivization of aesthetics over strategy. So this is something that's very important for you to do as a manager. Think about ways that you can actually incentivize quality of the experience, for example, which should mean both how it looks and what it's actually like to move through the different parts of the experience. This is something I've experienced in myself as an IC. So I've definitely had to have conversations about how we can make sure that, for example, the word craft, which can be really buzzwordy or triggering for designers, depending on if you have been in certain companies, craft can mean a lot of different things. And sometimes it can mean aesthetics. Sometimes it can mean that shared experience, the full experience. And so it's really important to make sure that you are clarifying what that means. And if there's a lot of focus on aesthetics and less about if it actually helps people get their tasks done, then how can things be more balanced? I think something else that's really important, as I've kind of mentioned, is making sure that design is not doing this as a silo. So how can design's goals and career ladders complement other functions? Some of the questions that you might be able to ask are, can we stop pressuring PMs to ship quickly? Can we require projects of a certain size to be tested at least once with users? Can we build out our design systems so that designers can actually move faster and concentrate more on information than thinking about which color button to use or which pixel size or spacing and things of that nature? And this is something that is incredibly important, because if design is operating in a silo and decides that experience matters, but doesn't go talk to PM or to engineering, they all have their own goals. So this is also, again, like a very kind of meta topic, but it is important to make sure that the goals are all working toward the same outcome, because if they are not, then you're just going to experience more of the same. So at Dropbox, we have staff and principal product designers who actually work with product and engineering directors. And this is something that's really helped to increase the value, the quality of the customer experience. And that's something that took a lot of advocacy and a lot of effort. And I'm super excited to be a part of that team. But that is something that needed to be prioritized across the company. So you and your leaders are going to have to work with other people to make that happen. And when the incentives actually do align, you're going to start to see positive results. So what I'm saying here is that if you're a manager, go out there and fight for your ICs. If you're an IC, you got to find out which of your managers or skip levels or whomever is going to actually be willing to go to bat for this, because it is not otherwise probably going to happen. So something you can do, again, is to talk to your manager and your skip level and see what their goals are. How can you align your goals with theirs? How can you talk their language? And how can you share solutions and not just problems? And those are my tips. So something I just want to say is that this is really challenging and that this is probably going to be a long-term kind of change. It's a cultural adjustment. So make sure to give yourself some love, to be kind to yourself and to others along the way. So to wrap up, many people think that design is aesthetics. It's important that you help your team see how design is actually contributing to the business or could contribute to the business. And it's important to get involved in an open, curious, and goal-oriented way. If you like this talk, I'm actually running a design strategy intensive workshop. That's going to be on June 26th, 28th, and 30th of this year. Early bird tickets are available on Rosenfeld Media's website, so you can go to the link to reserve your spot. With that, thank you so much for taking the time to listen and nerd out with me about design strategy. I am excited to hear a couple of questions. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Catt. That was really interesting. I haven't seen it being pitched before, the kind of the workflow model, but I think that's brilliant because you catch so many of the edge cases when you do that you don't normally think about.
Yes.
So yeah, if anybody has any questions, please do send them in. I'm going to ask one because I worked at a company where, like, I love the idea of get the business kind of mentality, and we're not getting involved. We're getting too pulled in too late. So I said, okay, well, let's go talk to them. And like, why aren't you talking to them? And the answer was, well, I didn't know we were allowed. So like, nobody had ever told them they couldn't, but they just assumed that they couldn't go talk to these other people who sat just one floor away in the building. So what kind of advice, or have you encountered something like that? And how do you get people to, I guess it's to your kind of show up point. So how do you get people to do that?
Yeah, some things that I've done is to be more visible. So I will, if we're working remotely or even if we're not, I will share things in Slack. I will invite people to have conversation with me. I will point things out, ask questions. I think it's very important to show that you are open and very excited to communicate and collaborate with other people. I will also say that, again, the value of having one-to-ones with people who are in different functions is really, really important. And so sometimes those people are afraid to reach out. Maybe they don't know how to work with designers yet. I've definitely had that happen to me before. So the more that you reach out to them, the better. I do think that, of course, like figuring out ways to have that happen at the design org level is also important. So it doesn't just have to be you, although of course you'll look very good if you are proactively reaching out. Maybe that's also a question of, hey, like, how can we show more people at the company how design works and give them the opportunity to actually be involved? So I think there's also definitely some organizational work that could happen.
Yeah, no, I've talked to people on the business side of things, and they're crying out for support.
Yeah.
They just don't know that it's available or where to get that support. So
yeah.
Brilliant. I think that brings us to time. But if anybody does have any questions, please post them in. We'll post them on the UXDX community Slack group, and we'll invite Catt to come and answer the questions there.
Perfect. Thanks, y'all.
So,
bye.
Thank you very much. So our next session, we actually have two speakers coming up now, and it is Lilia Royanova and Julia Yager-Reisen, who are both UX program managers at Google, and they'll be talking about taking action on data, how to set up a product health program. So I'd like to welcome Julia and Lilia to the stage. Hello.
Hello. Can you hear us?
Yep, hear you perfectly.
Awesome. All right. Hello, everyone. We're really excited to be here with today. As Rory said, I'm Julia Yager-Reisen, and I'm a UX program manager working on Google Cloud Platform. And I've been at Google for 9 years, and I'm here with my co-presenter, Lilia.
Hey everyone, my name is Lilia Royanova, also at Google for about 9 years, also a UX program manager and in the Google Cloud organization currently.
Awesome. All right, next slide. So by the end of this talk, we're going to answer the following questions. Why is product health important? How can you get buy-in from partner teams to implement a product health program? Why should you align on a single measurement framework? And how can you integrate product health best practices into your product health lifecycle? So next slide, we want to hear kind of from all of you. We're curious, why should we care about product health? What does product health mean to you? Please go ahead and type some answers into the chat if you can. Maybe a little quiet today, but all right, we can, next slide, we can keep going. We'll tell you a little bit about what we're thinking about. So there are a lot of dimensions to consider when it comes to determining if your product is healthy. What's working in your product, what's not, are you growing well, are users being retained, and so on. Next slide. When we talk about product health in this context, we're most interested in finding a consistent approach to evaluate the impact of what we launch in order to track progress against key outcomes. Next slide. To put it simply, the problem we're trying to solve is being able to answer the question, are we achieving our product goals, our business goals? Let's consider a type of observational bias that occurs called the streetlight effect, which is when people only search for something where it's easiest to look. As the anecdote goes, a policeman sees a man searching for something under a streetlight and asks what the man has lost. He says he lost his keys, and they both look under the streetlight together. After a few minutes, the policeman asks if he is sure he lost them there, and the man replies, no, he lost them in the park. The policeman asks why he is searching here, and the man replies, this is where the light is. In essence, it's harder to find something on the part of the floor that is not well lit. So we all collect a great deal of data from a wide array of sources, but each of these individual pieces of information are like pieces to a puzzle, and each of the teams that collect these are looking under their own like individual street lamps. And it's really critical to think through the best way to bring the pieces together and shine a light on the full picture of how the product is doing across the entire experience and stack. So by using a consistent framework across your product, this helps make sure you're bringing all the data together for that big picture view of the product health, and then enables you to take action on the product via data-backed decisions in order to move the needle on your specific goals. So let's take a look at how to apply this type of thinking within our version of the product health lifecycle. Initially, it's really critical to define what good looks like. What do you think is important to the business? What is going to be really important to the users to get right? Then we need to make sure we can measure whether users can actually achieve the goals that we outlined. Pre-launch, this can typically happen via benchmarking, surveys, A/B testing, but it's really critical to instrument your product so post-launch the user data can be properly collected and then analyzed. By instrumentation here, we mean implementing tagging within your product to enable metrics and user tracking, which is like a great process that basically sets up a good foundation for easy and insightful analytics. Next up, we'll monitor and assess to basically have a sense of what are the key things we need to work on to improve, as well as how we're tracking over time. And finally, we'll determine where to focus our efforts and always finite resources to make updates and continually evolve the product. All right. And with that, I'll pass it over to Lily.
Awesome. Thank you, Julia. All right. So we know why it's important to set up a product health program. Julia and I have actually done this with our teams at Google Cloud. And so we'd like to share with you some key factors for setting up a successful program that will last and will really take root in your organizations. So for us, obviously, we are working on an enterprise product in the context of large teams. But we think that these are broadly applicable, whether you're working on a consumer product, whether you're in a smaller organization. Hopefully, the lessons carry forward regardless. All right, so the first factor is articulating the value of the product health program to teams, almost like what we focused on in the beginning of this talk. Why is this important? Well, it's really about getting back to that question that Julia mentioned. Are we meeting our business goals? And if you have each team looking at silo data and not really aware of, what is the importance of the data between the different teams or understanding what it actually means, then you may end up with team-based solutions, just kind of piecemeal fixes to things. Whereas if you have a more holistic approach and you take a step back, you'll be looking at the big picture. You'll help your leadership and your stakeholders be more informed in their decision-making and ultimately have better, more integrated solutions. So as we mentioned, there's a lot of different teams that may be involved here. Your support team is collecting support tickets, right? And they'll probably have a priority of which is the topic that we're getting the most support questions about. Your finance team will be thinking about revenue, usage, adoption, retention, churn. They'll probably have a lot of data regarding that. UX research will be thinking about surveys and customer feedback, verbatim requests for features. Account management and sales will probably be listening to customer decision makers. And so all of these different teams have such an incredible wealth of information, but it may kind of live in its own world and its own pockets if we don't bring it together. So let's walk through an example. This is a very simplified version, but let's say that your product is focusing on adoption and usage. And you can see in this chart, it's up and to the right, it's going well. However, if you take a step back and superimpose satisfaction or CSAT, you can see that it's actually going down in this case. And so by being able to take a look at more data in a framework that makes sense, you can actually identify and address issues that you may not be able to see individually. An example of this is some enterprise products where users might have to use them because they were purchased by their organization, but they might not actually be so easy to use. So you can think about expense tracking software, for example. So some of the key lessons that we want to share from our own experience implementing this kind of thing. Being able to avoid blind spots by bringing data together and having aha moments like bringing in that CSAT. We've actually seen that happen with some of our engineering leaders, some of our product leaders. And so that truly shows us how it's important to bring this data together. Every team's work is important. Support, sales, UX research, it doesn't matter who it is. It's all important information that can help us make better business decisions together. And getting cross-functional buy-in from all the leaders of those organizations, or if you have a smaller org, maybe it's just individuals, getting that buy-in at the outset that you want to work together is going to be very helpful for making this successful in the long run. And I'll pass it back to Julia.
Thanks. All right. The second key factor is focused on getting everyone to rally around a single measurement framework. So overall, the most important piece is that the framework must be consistent. It's critical that teams across the organization begin speaking in the same language, but also that they begin standardizing the way that they measure and track their metrics. Each team is measuring and tracking differently. It decreases the ability to make clear decisions, and it makes prioritization difficult. So the same framework enables consistency, and eventually it makes it much, much easier to lead to comparability, which really, really decreases the effort needed to make decisions. Next, we'll take you through some examples of frameworks across the industry that you can use. We worked with our research team to come up with a framework, which is sort of an amalgamation of a few of these that works best for our particular org's needs. Next slide. So one of these that we pulled some inspiration from, obviously, was Google's HEART framework, which measures the quality of the user experience and identifies the goals of a project. Another one that was really interesting is the PIRATE framework. Abbreviated, it spells R. These metrics are intended to capture each stage of the customer lifecycle, and then each product will have unique metrics within each bucket that then track up to key performance indicators of the business. Another one that was really interesting to look at was Sequoia's framework, which focuses on how consumer companies can measure specific aspects to evaluate product health in order to continue to grow well, penetrate their market, and retain and engage users. So the benefit of a framework is in its ability to flex and scale. Let's say you have two products, one internal with a small number of users, the other external with a larger set of users and a higher revenue stream. The way that revenue interplays with CSAT is going to be the same no matter if it's an internal product versus an external one. And you can't compare revenue in this case, but you could compare adoption. As a result of having this holistic framework, you can say that the product on the left is still a healthy product, even though these are two very different contexts. You might use a stand-in for revenue, such as time saved, but this framework enables you to compare the relationships between and across the products. So big lessons learned on this one were, one, education around the health of your product is really important to help to make sure everybody just understands the baseline. This can include everything from basic sentiment metrics to education around where the data is coming from. Remember all those different street lamps, and everyone's been focused on specifically their space. But we need to make sure everyone gets familiar with the various data sources that exist, as well as their current benchmarks. The second lesson we really discovered was around starting with the framework first and not trying to force comparability at the outset. It will come later. It's just a longer term North Star. And don't force something so stringent initially. Flexibility is really key to getting everybody ramped up and going. Last but not least, sort of in a similar vein, lean into the gaps. You're never going to have everything perfectly in place from the jump. If you don't have any data for one dimension of the framework, acknowledge this, surface it within the holistic picture you're showcasing, and then make it an input into prioritization and road mapping discussions. Don't make it a blocker. With that, I'll pass it back to Lily.
Awesome. So we have aligned on the value of the product health program. We have aligned on a single framework that we're all going to use. And now it's really about making it real. So the third factor we want to focus on is integrating product health practices into your product lifecycle. Why is this important? Again, very similar trend here. Instead of focusing on individual standards and team-based approaches, team-based fixes for things, you can actually have, you can supercharge your organization by having templates, consistent processes, and playbooks to make sure that everyone is on the same page and speaking the same language. Of course, each team is collecting different types of data, but as long as at the high level we are aligned on the types of things that we want to measure and what they mean to our product and our business goals, then that is really helpful for us to be a successful business. So let's walk through a couple of examples. Again, remember the product health cycle that Julia walked us through. We use this as the basis for each of the examples we're going to share. But in your organization, you may have your own product lifecycle defined with your cross-functional partners. You may have a design process that you stick to. And so these will probably slot into that, into those frameworks as well. All right, so in the very beginning, when we define what good looks like, our product managers use product requirement documents. And this is basically a doc that it contains all the information about a new feature or a new product that we're going to work on, including things like who are the target users, what are the features going to be, what are the technical requirements. And as part of that list of information, you want to include success criteria based on the framework for product health that you align on. So let's say you use the Google Heart framework. You actually want to walk through and think about what is going to be each one of those buckets for this particular thing. And you can imagine that if all products within the org or all features within the org use that consistent planning method, it's going to help to bring consistency overall. As program managers, we want to make sure folks are getting started quickly. So we found that getting started guides have been super helpful for both of the teams that we've worked with and others as well. It helps to standardize and decrease the ramp up time. So things like, explainers and playbooks for how to set up a dashboard, or explainers of how to think about each metric and what it means. So once you get into the instrumentation stage, actually being consistent in how you evaluate and instrument your user journeys is another great way to ensure that you have product health baked into your process throughout your life cycle. And so for us, this has meant making sure that critical user journeys or in core user journeys are tracked consistently. So once you've defined what's important and you're tracking it consistently, how do you make sure that you're monitoring and regularly getting insights from the information that you've now collected? So for us, dashboards are a pretty great tool. We found that they are resonant with both our high-level leadership and also with our individuals on the team. And it provides a way to standardize again to the same framework so that everyone's kind of seeing that same consistent visual, but it also allows folks who are closer to the product to drill into the data if they would like to, whereas our leaders can kind of stay at the high level and just take a look through very quickly. Just a little tip here for Google internally, we use Looker Studio, and this is just one of the many templates that they provide directly. So, it can seem a little daunting to try to put together a big giant dashboard, but there are tools out there, whether from Google or other providers, that you can use. So the next two items are applicable throughout the life cycle. So you can see we've lit up the whole thing here, but central communications are really important for having a standard language, making sure everyone's on the same page, and maintaining a clear set of owners for what you're doing, whether it's owners of the instrumentation pieces or owners of particular product improvement working groups. And lastly, communication can come in many forms, like email or, post in your chat spaces. But we also recommend having a regular forum where everyone gets together, all your cross-functional stakeholders and product owners, and you discuss all the information that you have gathered. So it's a great place where people can bring their questions, they can learn more, they can even identify what working groups can get started to improve on any issues that you might be seeing. So to summarize, lessons learned, we talked about a lot of different examples of things you could be doing across different teams and across different products. So it can feel a little bit overwhelming. We highly recommend starting with a pilot with just one product or just one area of your organization, and then scaling up from there. Definitely allow for some deviation, just like Julia mentioned, with the framework that you choose, with the program that you develop. It may be different for different teams, how they prefer to communicate, how they prefer to work, how they define success criteria. And so allow for some deviation as long as at the high level you're aligned. And then lastly, it's really important to keep channels of communication open. So whatever makes sense again for your org, whether it's a regular forum, a chat channel, an email that you're regularly sending, however you all get together and talk, make sure that you are cultivating a culture of sharing and asking questions so that everyone's on the same page. And I'll pass it back to Julia.
All right. So in summary, next slide, having a standardized framework to evaluate product health enables you to know if you're achieving your business goals. So in order to make this effort successful, we recommend articulating the value of product health, getting buy-in from all those partner teams across your space to implement a product health program, getting all of those folks to then align on a single measurement framework, and then integrating product health best practices that make sense for your product health lifecycle. So next slide. If we revisit our street life again, if it's harder to find something on the floor where it's not well lit, we need to make sure we are illuminating the whole, not just focusing on one area. This takes a bit more time and effort, but it will set your product up for healthy growth in the long run. And with that, I think we'd like to open it up for questions. Thank you all for your time today.
Thank you very much. That was really interesting kind of insight into how you've structured it. I'm always intrigued at how other companies are tackling all the same problems that we face. So thank you very much for sharing that. So if anybody has any questions, please do write them in on whichever platform you're in, and we'll pass them through to Julia and Lilia. But I wanted to get started because as I was hearing that, what kept jumping into my mind, it's a bit of a trendy term now, but product ops. Because it's kind of a team that is responsible for the advocacy of better ways of working, of streamlining, of kind of writing guides and things like that. So what's your opinion of kind of this kind of collaboration that you've just described versus, I guess, the more product ops pieces that are spinning up in companies around the world now?
Yeah, I can start. So we work very closely with, we do have product operations folks. We also have, we call ourselves UX program managers. We actually have engineering program managers as well. So there's a whole set of people working across teams to make sure that we are running smoothly, that things are going successfully. And so it's just another part. I would say it's another team that we have to interface with. From the UX side, we're really bringing a focus on the user experience. But, for example, the finance team will have a lot of products folks working on, initiatives to address financial goals. And so it's about everyone coming together and having a conversation and getting on the same page, as opposed to having, us running something, prod ops running something else, engineering program managers studying a different thing. It's best to just align.
Great. And is there any authority there, or are you doing alignment through just kind of influence?
I can take that one. I would say it's about it's about influence, absolutely, but it's also about highlighting and echoing back the problems that leadership is facing, and making sure everybody that those problems are real and that they resonate, right? And I think that street lamp of everybody looking individually, prod ops being one of those street lamps, right, where they're looking at things through a very specific lens and gaining that alignment. Everyone has the benefit of having the holistic picture then. And it was around some experiments with pilot teams that we really helped showcase that by bringing that third metric in, or like we did with CSAT example, that all of a sudden, instead of indexing on 2 KPIs and letting some other things slide, we were able to look at the whole picture and make sure that we were improving the product holistically and not sort of over indexing on 1 or 2 things. So it is definitely through influencing, but I think if it's a real problem, people will listen.
Yeah, you're helping them solve a pain point.
Mhm.
Great. I think it's more a comment than a question from Natalia. She says, thank you for the presentation, interesting points. In my previous work, I was always pushing and cultivating culture of sharing and asking. That brings the team together. So I think she's agreeing with your comments there. One thing actually, just jumping on the point that you mentioned there about the third metric that you introduced, and that highlighted new and interesting things. The North Star metric is kind of popular and kind of trendy in some companies, and YouTube was actually one of the companies that popularized that with the minutes watched. So what's your opinion after your example there of, well, actually when you start layering your metrics is when you get the real value? So I don't know who best. We maybe go back to Lilia.
Sure. Yeah, you can't look at a million different metrics and make decisions based on that solely. So for sure, you want to prioritize what you're going to focus on. And I think there's North Star metrics within the different components of the framework that we're talking about. So to make it more concrete, if we're talking about user sentiment, there's actually like a ton of different user sentiment metrics that we have available. Satisfaction numbers that we have from surveys, satisfaction numbers that we have from in-product feedback, satisfaction that we hear from support. And so bringing all of that together is like the first step for us to then decide, okay, which one of these is the most important and which one of these is really going to move the needle for us.
Brilliant. And yeah, so just you kind of mentioned two things that I was last question I guess I have. If anybody has any others, please do send them in. It was the mixed methodologies. You said start with one team, but if everybody's kind of starting, I might choose Pirate, you might choose Heart, somebody else has gone North Star. Like, how do you then try to massage and move them back into a single one?
So I would definitely figure out the framework. I wouldn't say that like a small pilot should be empowered to choose a different framework to pilot. That would be a case for where you need to sort of align initially on what might make sense for your org. And I definitely recommend working with the research team to sort of assess what is going to make the most sense given the business goals of your organization. And that will just help lead you to what are the things we're going to care about the most and what do we need to kind of keep purview at all times. And it'll help you define your framework. Or you can leverage, like, I think Google's Heart framework is sort of a great one, like off the shelf to just start with and then tweak from there if it makes sense. But I wouldn't suggest the pilots be around changing the framework that gets used. It's more around test driving the implementation of getting teams ramped up on using the framework and making sure that you vet the processes of how they're implementing each aspect of it throughout that product health lifecycle, what worked really well, and then iterating on what maybe you hit some snags with that team so that once you then expand those pilots and scale them to other teams, you've kind of done it once within your org and you know what's going to work really well.
Brilliant. No, that's clarified it a lot better for me. So thank you for sharing. And I think actually that brings us to time. So just want to thank Julia and Lilia for sharing. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us.
Brilliant. So that brings us to our final talk for this evening. So I'd like to introduce Joshua Northcott, who's the CTO and co-founder of Hounder, and he'll be talking about taking off the life jacket, 30 life lessons. So I'd like to welcome Joshua to the stage. Welcome.
Hey, thanks so much, Rory. Thanks for having me. This is really awesome. Yeah, as it was just stated, we'll be talking a lot about just the life lessons that we've learned over the years. So just to kind of give a little bit of an idea here, this talk is really, the whole purpose of it is to unlock something in each and every one of us that is something that we might not, we could be better at. It challenges us. It challenges me every time I give this talk. but to challenge us with what we might, a weak spot we may have, or something we might have heard and it just refreshes you and ignites you and inspires you to do something that you may have heard before or never have done before. So enjoy. It's going to be, we're going to kind of rapid fire a lot of different points and lessons throughout. So it's going to be pretty fast paced, and yeah, looking forward to it. So just to get right into it, just to briefly talk, I'll just mention myself really quick. But yeah, I am the CTO and co-founder at Hounder. Previous to working at, starting my own company, I worked at other software organizations. So I come from the corporate I have more of a corporate background. I was the web director at Esri for about 10 years. So I've really been lucky to have this unique kind of career over the years to be able to see what it's like from more on a larger corporate leadership type of role, as well as starting my own company and growing that from the ground up, and more of that startup type of mentality. And so it's a lot of these lessons and these tips we're going to go through are really looking at from both of those perspectives. So if you are, working, whether it be for a business or you have your own, this will all attain to all of you. A little bit about what we're doing now is we are a digital design development company. And so we partner with a lot of the largest companies in the world to build product, new experiences, and all that good stuff. So that's just a little bit about myself and us. But getting right into it, the business side of things, we're going to break a lot of these things I've learned over the years that we're going to challenge all of us on is things in the business. So this will start. So it doesn't matter if you work for yourself or if you are, you have your own company or you work for somebody. This all pertains to everyone. So first and foremost, honesty. This oftentimes we talk about honesty as like this is something everyone does, or this is something that is a no-brainer. But in all respects, it's actually very difficult in many contexts, in many cases. But really embrace being honest to whether it be, especially with what you're good at, what you're not good at. When you're in the hiring process, be upfront on things that you still need to grow in and things you don't, because when you're honest, it is a breath of fresh air to everybody. And it's really done wonders I've had to really learn this because this was hard for me, especially when we created a company from the ground up, is there were some times where we really wanted to work with maybe a particular client, but they started to ask us stuff that wasn't really aligned in our area of expertise. And there's that ethical part where it's like, oh, we need this, we're running real lean. We got this. This would be great. But we had to, but luckily we were honest about it and said, you know what, we might not be the best person if this is what you're looking for, even though we really wanted that. And you know what, it's actually being that was a breath of fresh air to these organizations. And that actually led to more and more projects with them just because of that fact. So when in doubt, be brave and be honest. Measure yourself by customer success. So it doesn't really matter what some things of what even though, it doesn't really matter of all the things you think you might be good at necessarily. Measure yourself by what your customer success is. Look at how are you making that boss look good? Are you actually if you're working with a client or a customer, are they seeing success in that? Measure yourself by that outcome, by those results. It is the ultimate best way to see where you need to get better and what you're already good at. Embrace constraints. All our UX and UI designers out there, it would be being a former designer as well. Whenever I had a project that was like it didn't have a brand guide to start with, or it was like the client was just telling you, hey, whatever you want to do, that's like chaos to me. Like you want to embrace constraints. If you don't see some in a project or you're working on a product, start asking, what are the technical constraints here? What are the design constraints? What are the brand constraints? Constraints give us good barriers so we know what the focus is and can be. It can also really help on the financial side of things. If you are a startup and you're lean, great. Those pennies that you have and that little bit of money you might have, you will use every cent of that and use it for the right ways because you have those constraints. It just is embrace those constraints. It is a real game changer. Also, ideas are free. So really culminate in your culture, in your work, really culminate a culture of ideas. All the best products, the best services all come from people starting to just talk about ideas. And sometimes the first one might not be really hitting the mark, but that spurs the next one and the next one and the next one until you land on something. So really always in every meeting, ask people, what do you think? Do you have any ideas here? Call it out, especially for those that might be quiet. People sometimes are sitting on some amazing ideas and they're free. So just really think about that when you're in those conversations. Pretend you're a rocket scientist. I love this one. This one actually comes from a friend of mine named Mark Hemian, who is just an amazing founder for several different startup companies over the years. And several of these are ideas I've learned from him over the years. But when you are working on, whether it be a product, you're designing something new, you're maybe starting your own company, think of yourself as that kind of scientist where you have, because no matter what, every product that ever goes out, it's the ultimate science experiment. You think you might know what someone needs. You think you might know that this will meet someone's goals and help them. But in reality, you have a theory and you test that, and you're testing it, and you're testing your hypothesis. So really approach new projects, new designs, new organizations. Really approach each and every one of those like you're a rocket scientist, and get really scientific with it. It really helps. Also, business needs over tools. Don't let tools dictate your business processes. It should always be, you can use a cork board for your workflows and things like that until you realize how your organization or your division that you're in, how it should really work and operate, and then implement tools to help automate those things. But don't let the tools dictate how you should work. Also, 10-minute meetings. This was a game changer for me. 10-minute meetings, it's amazing what you can discuss and talk about if you give yourself that constraint of 10 minutes. And then it opens your day to get the actual work done. So really engage in that. Now, if you're doing the big discovery meetings that take a day, 2 days, things like that, of course. But for most conversations with your team, with a stakeholder, you can try to limit it to 10 minutes and see what it does for you. It's pretty remarkable. Now, other than honesty, this is something that also Hounder got really great success in, and kind of went off the backs of this, is mailing handwritten cards. If you're doing a new idea or new project, or you're trying to make new connections, mail handwritten cards. It's amazing. We started doing it, and that's what really drove a lot of the customers and work that we did, because we got their attention by knowing them and understanding them and handwriting the card to them, which no one does or sees anymore. So just a kind of a neat, fun little tidbit there. And people would take pictures and tweet it and all that stuff. So it's really cool. Highly recommend it. Also, punch above your weight class. If you're still talking to the folks that you're currently working with on a constant basis, great, and that's awesome. But if you want to continue to move forward in any, if you have higher goals or other sites of where you're currently at, start talking to those folks, start commenting on their posts, on their LinkedIn comments and things like that. Start engaging and really just look for what's that goal that you have and go after it. Don't sit and wait for it to come to you, because it never will. So constantly look at, what's my next goal in life? What's that thing I'm doing? If I'm influenced by this person, I'm going to go and talk to them. Don't be afraid to do that and engage them. Punch above your weight class always. Everyone's involved in the creative process. So us creatives, we got to stop. We do have to sometimes stop saying, oh, this is a creative meeting. These are just for the creatives or the designers or something like that. Because in reality, everyone is truly involved in that creative process. The product managers have a lot of creative ideas around, because they're talking to those customers. The developers have a lot of great ideas in that creative process, because they understand the engineering side of how it really has to be done and created. So really have a culture of just including everyone, similar to what Catt said as well. Really provide that inclusion, because everyone truly is involved in that creative process. And a company that talks about themselves is boring. So if those our designers and our marketing friends that are here, really look at what's the outcome of things to talk about. So customer successes, talk about the customer, how that you make them successful. Talk about because they use your product, that was the outcome of what resulted in that. Talk about them, because at the end of the day, it's all about people. no one wants to just hear a company talk about how great they are. It's the worst. So just kind of keep that in mind. Marketing managers, content marketers, keep that in mind, because the true story is the product. It's the outcome, and it's the people. Observe, then learn and create. Yes, before you create, it saves you so much time if you really take the time at the beginning to truly learn and understand what the needs might be for any project or any product, and learn specifically what it really needs to be before you even start picking up the pencil and paper, before you start doing any design work or development work. Really take that time to observe and learn first before creating, always. A good reminder, and this is always a good reminder for me, is people pay for products and services, and outcomes, not projects. So even though it's great to be task-oriented and be task-minded, but that's kind of goes down to the basics of just getting things done, is being task-oriented and being responsible. But when it comes down to it, people are looking for outcomes. So we need to also be results-oriented and discuss when we're discussing with our stakeholders, instead of spending too much time just talking about all the tasks that's going on, although that is important. We do need to refocus on the outcomes, because that's what people are paying for. They're paying for the outcomes. They're paying for seeing things and the results that come out of it. So always keep that in mind. Challenge assumptions frequently. This one actually there's one that I constantly have to work on, because I'll assume and then think it's fact because I make an assumption. It just makes sense in my own brain. So challenge those assumptions frequently. It's amazing what that will spark in terms, especially if you're working with a team. Challenge those things in a good way, and great things will come out of it, because we assume so many things even though we don't realize it. Now we're going to get into talking more about us from more of like that personal kind of perspective. So saying no is a strength. I've really had to learn this, especially in leadership, and then especially when I started my own company. Saying no is something that for me, I deep down, I want to be a people pleaser. I want to say yes to almost everything that comes up. But just like a muscle that you have to develop strength in, you have to constantly exercise it. And the word no is very much that. It is hard in a lot of circumstances to say no when you know something's the right way to go and the right thing to do. Designers see this all the time as well. Developers see this all the time as well. Just saying no is a strength, and remember that. So when there's something that comes up, don't be afraid to say no, and know that especially when it's for the greater good. Be ready to do so. Something Catt mentioned as well, to a slightly different spin, but yeah, show up every day. Don't tell anybody, but there's sometimes, even as a co-founder, there's sometimes that I don't want to be super present and just talk to a lot of people and be very engaged. But I have to oftentimes stir, in some cases, on certain days, I got to stir myself up. So when you're like that on some days, which everyone, I believe, gets that way at one point or another, life happens, but you need to stir yourself up why you like doing what you do and why you care about it again, and just show up and be engaged. Don't be that person in those meetings or in those calls that just look like they're doing something else. Show up, be engaged, look at people in the eye, stay hungry as well at the same time. It's very similar. Just keep stirring yourself up. It's the days that you don't feel like it the least is when you really need to stir something inside you. So stay hungry. When I lose that, feel like I'm losing that fire, that's when I need to kind of, really kind of start, throw in that I need help kind of wave that flag a bit. Because if you don't start stirring yourself up and staying hungry, you can get into that little lull. So to avoid that, you gotta just, when you feel like it the least, stir it up. Your title doesn't matter. Now, some folks might look at this and go, well, you know what, Josh, hold up. My title does matter, because maybe in my company, in my organization that I'm in, I need to, my title actually depends on how much I make and things like that. And 100% understand that. What I'm really referring to here is, yeah, maybe you have junior designer on your title today because you've only been a few years in, but you know what? You can go ahead and start operating right now at that capacity of a senior level designer. Start making sure you're spending time being mentored by those folks that you want, maybe that you want to be like, or you want to work at that level and that capacity. Start it with it being in here in your head, and start getting there and start operating at that ability. Learn and operate at that ability. And guess what? When it comes down to it, when the company needs the really good ideas and things like that, they don't look and go, well, they're just a junior so and so. No, we need him in or her in here to go over this, because they see the potential, they see what you do. So don't just operate at that title level. You're more than that. Stop saying I feel, or in my opinion. I say this because I will be very guilty of doing this oftentimes. But the reality is own your idea, own your thought. Be confident in yourself. Because if you recognize something that might need to get better or be different than where it's going, you don't need to discount it in any way, shape, or form. Say it and own it and be confident in it, because it'll spur some really great ideas as well, and create change and positive change. Take 20 minutes to learn something new each day. This one, I'll tell you, out of a lot of them, this is the one I always need, but I struggle with the most. But every time I get into a good habit of learning something new each day, it is remarkable how often it comes up in conversation, whether it be with a client, with our team, that really helps get us over a hurdle, or it becomes something I can utilize and use because I've learned. I use the Pocket app now, and it's a really great app that you can choose what topics you're into or that you want to learn more about, and it will feed those things to you in nice bite-sized chunks. So it's a nice little way. Or sometimes I'll scan Twitter with certain people that I'm following just to take a few minutes to learn something that I didn't know already. And like I said, every time I do that, it seems to come up in a conversation or in a customer or client's needs in some way, shape, or form pretty quickly after I learn it. So it's remarkable. Be cheerleaders for others all the time. We love it, right? When people are, will be someone who will be, all for us and all in for us, and inspire us, and always are on our side. We love that. And sometimes we'll think to ourselves just inherently that, oh, that's maybe this person in leadership, that's their job. But in reality, it's all of our jobs to build people up, to be there for people. It's all about people at the end of the day, like we said before. So be those cheerleaders, be that person to inspire and to enable and empower to all those around you. It's not just someone who might have a leadership title or anything like that. Operate in that, and good things will come of it. Soft skills are difference makers. I think we can all look and say, when you look at those people that you love to work with, and then go, I love working with her, or I love working with him. Oftentimes it's because they have really great soft skills. They're easy to talk to. They're someone that, if someone is maybe has aggressive emails or anything like that they know how to respond, and in a very good way, in a very positive way. Soft skills are difference makers. People want to work with you. People want to have those conversations with you. They want to include you in things. So have those soft skills. It truly is difference makers. And I'd rather work with someone who might not be as talented than someone who's just grumpy and and doesn't want to and doesn't really want to engage. So just something to be aware of. When it comes to hiring, focus on the person, because we all learn every day. We learn new things in this field. Things are happening so quick. So I can always teach someone how to be a better designer, or I can always teach someone how to maybe be a better front-end developer. I can't teach someone how to treat people. So look at those areas and ask yourself, is this someone I'd like to work with every day if you're looking at hiring? Because remember, we can teach, and we can also inspire, and everyone learns something new in a day, especially in this industry. So focus on the person as well as their skill sets. So disagree. It sparks creativity. There's a great book by Aaron Irizarry called Discussing Design. Highly recommend it for all us UX, UI, and even product managers, program managers. It is really great, but really create a culture that's like, hey, it is okay to disagree, because when you do that and you talk about it and you disagree in those right ways where it's no defenses are there, that's where the real, true, amazing ideas and creative thoughts come into play. So don't be afraid to do that. And do it obviously in a nice, great way, and not a harsh way in any way. But disagreeing, it sparks creativity. Transparency equals trust. You're never too big or too high up on the chain of any organization or anything like that to not show transparency. It's just kind of it's something we all need to do and really think about on a daily basis, and make sure it's instilled in us as best as possible. I've never met a successful pessimistic person. Anything good always starts with first a belief in something, a belief in seeing this through, a belief in working on this, this project, or designing out, experiences for people. It starts with the belief that this is going to be something that's going to be special and something that's going to change lives or change the world around us. So make sure you're checking here, because some of us can sometimes be naturally that way. I know I can. So something that I always have to check myself as well, because it all starts with that belief. 10-minute email breaks. This is another one that I'll do less than 10 minutes in the morning, then in the middle of the day, and then at the end of the day. That way you can focus on all the work that needs to be done, things that move your business forward or your product and company forward. It really is a game changer. Take those little breaks here and there. Don't let it rule you. That's for sure. This one's for me as well. Stop saying I'm so busy. Everyone's busy. We're all busy as professionals here. Sometimes saying that, even though you might not mean to, sometimes saying that makes it feel for other people that, oh, you must be busier than me, or something like that, and maybe I'm less important, or something like. There's some things that can come out of that, so just be aware. But I like to try to erase that from my vocabulary, even though it wants to come up every once in a while, because I'll be busy. Balance in everything. This just goes without saying. Work-life balance, obviously really key, but too much of anything is usually not very good. So just keep an eye on it. Keep an eye on, that time you're spending on work and with family and yourself. Make sure there's balance in all of those things. All right, now getting into the risk side, we're going to just rapid fire these. Focus only on what's essential. Don't focus on stuff. If this is going to move my product forward, or this is going to move my business forward, or this is going to move our team forward, that's what I need to focus on. What moves the needle? Everything else doesn't matter. It really doesn't. Focus on truly what's the goal, what's going to move things forward, and that should be, and laser focus on those things. If it's not a heck yeah, it's a heck no. This is something we live by here at this company, here at Hounder. If it's even if it's a hiring decision, heck yeah, we would love to work with this person every day. Or if it's not that, then it's a no. Or if it's a partner we want to work with, or a new client, it's like, oh yeah, heck yeah, this is a no-brainer. Then that's a yes. Anything else, it's a no. Something for all of us to remember: time is expensive. Whether you own your own company or you work for somebody, just being a good employee, think about your time. What time are you investing in? And also, it's the most important thing that you have is your time as well, right? So look at what are you spending your time on, because it's expensive one way, shape, or the other. No sales equals no business. There's times where we've had designers, developers alike will have to pick up stop what they're doing, pick up the phone and start making sales calls. The 5 of the biggest software companies in the world and the most revenue are all sales and marketing tools. So every company, they can't exist without sales. So don't underestimate that. Don't underestimate that for every minute you may spend on building a product or designing your product, you'll have to spend probably 2 times that on marketing and sales for it. you can't underestimate what it takes to get people to really utilize your product, even though if your product is amazing, or your website, etc. You got to spend that time. Couple quick ones. Grow as demand for you grows. We sometimes, especially in the startup world, it's like growth is key, but the biggest thing is, really make sure you're doing great work. People like what you're doing. Your product is being utilized, and you're focusing on that. And then as that demand grows, grow. You don't want to self implode. Build teams based on individuals, not skills. Cross-functional teams are key. If you're a manager in this place, look at who needs to be paired together. Don't just group everyone together based on their skills. Last ones, document, don't create. When you're doing social media, just document what you're doing. Don't feel like you have to create all new content just on social media. If you're helping, the company move forward, do something, document what that looks like and put it out there. Don't feel like you have to create all this new kind of content from scratch, because what you're doing is pretty remarkable, and really people are more interested in that genuineness and what's real. And then lastly, you got anything that's worth anything, you're usually not going to get a yes right away. So keep grinding, keep going. A lot of us have a tough time with the word no when we hear it and we don't try again. Just keep going, keep following up, keep going, because it's usually the 9th, 10th, 12th, 20th time is when you get to where you need it to go. So don't get discouraged, and don't give up, and don't stop. That's everything for me. I really hope you got something out of this. At least we're able to get a couple little pieces that just spoke to you and unlock something in you. Would love to hear from you at any point, and looking forward to also feel free to reach out to me, but also looking forward to any questions you might have. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Josh. That was rapid fire, as you said, but some really good piece of insight there.
Cool.
Brilliant. There's one personal kind of question. It's, please repeat the name of the book and the author that you mentioned.
Yes. So it's called Discussing Design, and it's from Aaron Irizarry. And he co-wrote it with another person too. I can't remember his name. But yeah, if it's I believe it's an O'Reilly book. So yeah, but called Discussing Design. Really great book that can really help just kind of set the stage the right way when you want to discuss design. You want to start there's just disagreements and that creativity that sparks from it. It's a wonderful book that helps your team.
Brilliant. So Natalia, I hope you can look up that book now. One question that I had, actually, because there's so much, where do you struggle the most? Where is the one or two that it's kind of the ones that you have to keep reminding yourself about?
Oh, that's a really great question. The biggest one I think that I struggle with the most, that I really have to kind of check myself on, is focusing on really truly what matters. That moves the business forward or moves project forward, etc. Because I love to say yes to a lot of things. I love to be involved, and it's just that's just a part of who I am. And so I've had to really learn, and I have to constantly remind myself that, hey, like, what really is going to move this forward is if I do this, not if I do that other thing. So really kind of checking myself a bit when it comes up, because I can see a squirrel pretty quickly and go, ooh, that looks fun, or whatever. But it's really being locked in on what truly matters, and will move things forward.
Yeah, no, it's difficult as the kind of co-founder, because you're trying to juggle so many balls in the air that, but yeah, you do have to. It's something I struggle with as well. So
yeah, it's a constant juggling act, right?
Brilliant. Well, I think actually that brings us to time. So I just want to say thank you once again for sharing all of your tips.
Thanks all. Thanks so much.
Brilliant. So that actually brings us to the end of our event for today. But if you did like the sessions today, and you like the concept of what we're trying to do in improving the way the product teams work, please do consider joining us at our event. It's in 2 weeks, so it's probably unlikely that you'll book a ticket to New York at this stage. But we'll have 500 people, 25 speakers, and our workshops are sold out. But if you are interested as well, we also host a conference in Dublin in Ireland in October. So please do consider, it's actually bigger than our USA one because that's where we were originally based. And we get speakers from product, UX design and dev because we really want to break down the barriers and get product teams working better together. But if you can't join us at one of those sessions, I do look forward to hoping you'll join us at one of our next upcoming UXDX online events. So thank you very much to all of our speakers tonight for sharing their insights, and thank you for watching and joining us tonight. So thank you and see you.